Lemon, Cook, Rafferty, Denton, Big, Kirkland, Maska, Little, Mott, Arnold, Miller, Mitchum, Hart.
In the mid-sections, 40-13-5 and 40-13-6 going by the 8-75-7 of Mr. Kirkland et al. Describing that willful or malicious or intention.
And they don't let you state the party affiliation of the candidate for whom they intend to vote.
I'll get a picture of you now, Bob.
Yeah, I'd like to recognize from the local academy.
The legislature supporting care of the innocent, elderly, and disabled.
It condemns the federal guidelines and says the legislature.
Board members today voted to draw up a resolution supporting the concept of earmarked funds. One member said education has made tremendous progress under the earmarking. Another felt unearmarking would endanger educational funding on the local level. There was also discussion about a possible meeting between the board and a local legislative delegation to consider the impact unearmarked funds would have on the board's budget. The board also heard from its attorney, Vaughn Robison. Robison informed board members that a local family's complaint of discrimination in busing, as reported by Channel 12 News on Monday, has been reviewed by District Judge Robert Varner, who opposed any consideration of school zone reassignment. Robison said Judge Varner also rejected any reevaluation of the county's zone-type desegregation plan. This afternoon's meeting then adjourned into an executive session. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
He is a great youngster. He's just 18 years old, which is remarkable. He ought to be a senior in high school. But if he just keeps coming, he's going to be a great player. But our team, I've been real pleased with him, Jeff. This is, we just got one senior out here, Scott, and the rest of them, one junior, the rest freshmen and sophomores, and I think they've accomplished quite a lot. We won more games in the league this year without King than we did the year before with him, and the league's tougher. So maybe we've got a little better team.
conference members were divided into 8 standing committees, each assigned different topics ranging from education, health care, and social services to equality and justice. ADC President Joe Reed says the conference will take a position on some of the key issues in these areas. He says the ADC is against the proposed gasoline tax and says highway funding should come from the truckers since they use the highways more. Reed says the conference will fight legislation aimed to stop free lunch programs. He says it will also support more funding for the Department of Pensions and Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Stressing the ADC's support of President Carter, Reed says the conference has rejected national black leaders such as Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm and Congressman Walter Frontroy, who oppose black leaders who support the president. He says those politicians should stay out of the state once the black leadership has taken a position. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
A lot of the recipes people had given us to try to use for them, and then a lot of them are my family recipes and places that I worked when I was in college. And friends have given me some that I use personally. Some of them I had not used it to put in their personal recipes.
The Vice President met with freezing temperatures at Maxwell Air Force Base, but received a warm welcome from the Alabama Democratic Conference. Mr. Mondale touched on the importance of the civil rights movement, which had its roots in Montgomery and spread across the land.
Perhaps the civil rights movement strengthened America in an even more vital way. For year by year, as the struggle wore on, we gradually saw the light that blacks and whites of this country, whether in Alabama or in Minnesota, are bound together in a common destiny. We can only work miracles in America if we work together. We can make a better life if and only if we tap the most powerful force on earth, and that is the power of men and women devoted to human dignity and human love. That is what wins. That is what wins.
The 42nd Vice President endorsed the present administration, citing its accomplishments, but also realizing that it is not perfect and has yet to complete all of its goals. Mr. Mondale says education can change the current economic plight of many blacks and minorities because knowledge can open the doors of virtually any job field. He tied that statement in with the fact that the Carter administration has added 9 million more jobs in the last 3 years. Throughout his speech, the Vice President emphasized human rights for all, recounting the words of the Constitution, "We the people," which does not refer to race, creed, or religion. He left members of the Alabama Democratic Conference with a challenge to improve life for all Americans together. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News. The Vice President arrived at Maxwell Air Force Base and within minutes was headed toward the Montgomery Civic Center. It had been cold when he stepped off Air Force 2. However, the Alabama Democratic Conference's welcome was warm. In his address to the ADC's 20th annual meeting, the Vice President touched on the historic role the civil rights movement has had in shaping America. Mr. Mondale also took the opportunity to do some campaigning. He said the Carter administration has achieved a great deal in its 3 years in office, but many goals still need to be met. The Vice President spoke of the 9 million jobs the administration has added to the workforce and its international human rights campaign. Above all, equality was Mr. Mondale's theme, and he stressed this to the Alabama Democratic Conference.
If you want to strengthen the spirit of America, give everyone a stake in society. If you want to strengthen the economy, tap the talent and the drive and the imagination of every American entrepreneur. If you want our children to believe their school lessons about justice and equality, let them see it in the American system so they have examples to believe in and to follow. Give them proof that it really works. Show them that businesses and unions and governments too can be run by people, black and other minorities. Show them that we mean it when we say that America was meant for everyone.
In closing, the Vice President asked the crowd for its support on March 11th and again in November. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
Field to Bowie. Macy takes the shot. Hey, ties it up. Driving against Minifield. Martin. It wouldn't go. Macklin.
The right spot at the right time for the easy tip.
Macy. Scales turnaround jumper. Put on top. Under to Bowie. Bowie got it.
That was a great pass. Great pass.
Martin. 13 points for Ethan Martin. There's the ball down and up, and that's it. LSU 80, Kentucky 78. Hall and Dale Brown shake hands, and the LSU fans explode onto the court to congratulate the Fighting Tigers.
Days for television than it is for attendance. But because of the news media,
The major television audiences want to see people in the stands giving you ideas of what we need to do, and we're going to try to give you good Montgomery out, or do you feel like that's a disadvantage? The ratings for the 1979 Blue and Gray television telecast were very good, and that the network is looking forward to working with us on the Blue and Gray organization this year. As you all know, the contract with CBS was very important to us. It's very important because of all our charity programs, and we're very thankful that we received this notice. As you know also that we had very good coverage last year, thanks to all of y'all. In our 1979 game, we received 29% audience participation.
Greg Cook for LSU. In the Scales, 2 points and a foul.
Zone with man-to-man responsibilities. A little confusing.
Johnson off the glass. Johnson. Scott over to Davis. Davis missing. Rebound Macklin.
Again, LSU showing great patience on their offense. They
Getting it back is Turner. Stroud in the lane. 2 points. There it is.
There he is in the lane in there.
Game. Derek Horde. Turner put it up. Rebound Bowie.
Another great block by Sam Bowie.
Round to Minifield. Under to Bowie. Bowie puts the Kentucky in the lead.
Now they just go into the...
Bowie. Fouled by Thomas. They will work playing, though. They kept it in very, very good.
As a matter of fact, they've come back. They were down.
Bowie tying the score at 57. Thomas coming out. Stieg is back in for Ole Miss. 22 points for Sam Bowie.
8 for 8 for the big...
Federal Judge Robert Varner told the commissioners he would make his February 13th order permanent if their attorneys chose not to take advantage of hearings set for today. The attorneys for the commissioners have not made themselves available to comment on the reasons for canceling today's hearings, but it clears the way for Judge Varner to permanently bar the commissioners or anyone else from interfering in the proposed prison. There are two other legal battles still pending in federal court in Birmingham. They are both in Judge Foy Guin's court. Earlier this week, Judge Guin turned down a request by the commissioners to postpone condemnation procedures on the 600-acre tract of land that is owned by Kimberly Clark. That leaves the way open for the commissioners to ask for a dismissal of those procedures, and that would comply with Judge Varner's order. Since Judge Varner's order prohibiting interference, the state has asked Judge Foy Guin to dismiss another suit filed by a group called Citizens for a Better St. Clair County. Those hearings will be held March 6th. Governor James's legal advisor, Mike Waters, says their office will now resume efforts to obtain the land from Kimberly Clark. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
How did you feel when you found out Ron was going to be born on the 29th?
Well, I was just kind of concerned about when I was going to tell him when his birthday was, and I just thought, well, we'll just have to have his birthday on March the 1st, maybe the day after.
Well, birthdays are such big events for kids, and by the time he gets 2 or 3, he's going to be excited. What are you going to tell him when he finds out that there's no February 29th every year?
Hope he understands. I don't know. I just tell him that.
It was 1 month ago when Selma Mayor Carl Morgan and the City Council decided to move the families onto Craig. That touched off an immediate response since Morgan had charged the government with dragging its heels in the matter. The city of Selma wants to use the deserted housing units for low and moderate income families and sell some of the units to private individuals. The government is discussing how many of the units will be sold and how many will be used for public housing. In an effort to clear up the problem, Mayor Morgan and other city officials went to Washington but returned without a firm commitment from Air Force or Housing and Urban Development representatives. The mayor says he set no new deadline for the city to move additional families onto Craig.
I promised Joe Meese, Undersecretary of the Air Force, on my last conversation with him, that as long as I felt that progress was being made on Craig Air Force Base, that I wouldn't move anybody else into Craig.
Morgan says despite differences between the city and the government, he's confident a final decision will be made within the next few days. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News, Selma.
Selma Mayor Carl Morgan hopes to have a permanent replacement for the city's police chief within 30 to 60 days. He says the job probably will be filled from applicants who will be interviewed beginning next Tuesday. Until a permanent top law enforcement officer is found for the city, Morgan says he wants to keep a close watch on matters. He says a team of state and federal investigators arrived here in Selma this week to probe internal affairs of the police department. The investigation came on the heels of some police unrest.
They are looking at court records, fine records, warrants, just general collection monies procedures in the police department.
Are there any allegations that there may be some monies that have been misspent?
Well, there's no question that any time that you have an investigation, you might find that. However, no allegations have actually been made.
Morgan says he wants to replace retired police chief Frank Laporte with someone from out of town. He wants a well-qualified man, and he says a starting salary of $18,000 annually will have to be increased several $1,000s to get a replacement for his police chief.
Mayor Morgan may be strapped with the acting job of police chief for a longer period than he anticipates, at least until he's satisfied with the investigation that's going on. Reporting from Selma, George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
There were thousands of people in Opp this weekend. People from everywhere gathered to watch a rodeo, a rattlesnake rodeo. The weekend affair is sponsored by the Opp JCs as a means of making money to apply toward their many civic projects. The people were not disappointed. More than a dozen unofficial snake hunters rounded up 186 rattlesnakes for the rodeo. Some were milked of their venom before some very fixed eyes. Others were just dangled and handled before unbelieving faces. Even at the concession stands, there were throngs of people waiting for snake. That's right, snake, a generous, tasty piece of snake. For some, it was a first, and for others, just more like before. But Opp's 21st annual Rattlesnake Rodeo had more than just snakes, the annual buck dance contest.
Good, there you go.
21st Annual Rattlesnake Rodeo in Opp. I'm Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News in Opp.
Last fiscal year, the Special Olympics gave the Governor's Commission on Physical Fitness $7,383.20 to help pay the administrative cost of the commission. The money was transferred without authorization of the board until today. The board also approved another payment of about $4,000 out of this year's funds. In both cases, the money was approved after it was spent, and in one case, the board didn't give its approval until about a year had passed. Officials with the Special Olympics and the Fitness Commission say nothing's wrong with the way the funds have been transferred, and they say most of the work the Physical Fitness Commission does benefits Special Olympics. A breakdown of the payments for last year shows the Special Olympics picking up the tab for office rent, telephones, auto repair, gasoline, and booklets dealing with nutrition. One of the expenses paid by the Special Olympics was $19.95 for gasoline from a transmission repair shop. Commission officials told me they didn't know why, and the bookkeeper says that's the way it was turned into her. According to them, the money was necessary because the state didn't give them enough. Senator Hinton Mitchum of Albertville is the new chairman of the Special Olympics. He says they hope to get the whole thing straight, and adopting a budget for the first time will help. In the budget they approved today, $3,500 was set aside to give the Fitness Commission for administrative cost. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
Last year, some $41 million in illegal drugs was confiscated by Alabama narcotics officers. A spokesman from the Department of Public Safety says this amount doesn't even scratch the surface of the state's drug traffic. That's why a statewide toll-free number is being provided by the Alabama Elks Association, State Department of Education, and the State Department of Public Safety to try and stop drug pushers. The helpline provides a confidential way of revealing information about drug distribution.
We have researched other secret witness lines used, such as the Montgomery and Birmingham and other cities, and they hardly endorse this approach.
Creel says Alabama's smuggling laws are more lenient than surrounding states, which attracts more drug dealers and pushers. He says some stricter laws will be introduced to the state legislature for consideration this session. If you have information about drug activity, call Drug Helpline 1-800-392-8001. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Nationally, it will take some 270,000 workers to find out who and how many people make up the country's population. Beginning April 1st, 3,800 workers will take an official count in Alabama. Montgomery will be the district office for census operations in 15 southeast counties. The original purpose of the census is required to apportion seats in the U.S. Congress. Now, $50 billion federal dollars are allocated using census statistics. It also determines the location of some plants and some businesses. Senator Donald Sturt today told the meeting of census workers it's the feeling of some that an accurate population count was not obtained 10 years ago, especially among blacks and rural residents. April 1st has been declared Census Day by Montgomery Mayor Emery Fulmer. Most of the 1980 census will be taken by mail, but there will be numerous door-to-door workers. All information gathered will be held in confidence. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
It's also about the only federal...
It happened south of Utah in Greene County. Authorities originally thought 2 tankers hauling ammonia had ruptured, but it turned out the leaking tankers were carrying liquid plastic. The 20-car train was en route from San Francisco to Pensacola. A Frisco Railroad official says the next step is to transfer the ammonia to another tanker.
Then when we transfer the load of ammonia solution, then we will proceed to set the derailed cars in the clear and restore service.
Authorities say the 25 families who were evacuated when it was believed ammonia was leaking are now back home. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
Hey, Dad. You got lipstick and I didn't.
I did. I mean, I graded them. I've discovered that the people here in Alabama love my husband. And he loves Alabama, and that's why I came here, because of the primaries on the 11th of March, and I wanted to see just exactly what he said is true.
What has he said about Alabama?
It's great. It really is. He's gotten great reception, great press, good press, lots of coverage, which is unusual, because he usually gets a blackout, and so you've been very kind to him, very fair, and the people are really nice. I've been very Southern hospitality, and very well received.
Neil Bush says his father agrees with the president's stand on boycotting the Summer Olympics. He says it doesn't make sense for this country to participate in the Moscow Games after the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. And on domestic matters, young Bush says his father can balance the national budget. He says federal spending should be reduced and private industry should be allowed to function with a minimum of governmental regulation. When asked how his father feels about former President Ford running for president, Bush says his father would welcome Ford to the campaign trail, but he says he doesn't think Ford will run. He says the Bush campaign was temporarily hurt by the outcome of the New Hampshire debate with Governor Ronald Reagan. He says that campaign has recovered now and is back in full swing. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
On February 21st, Governor James said he would neither sign nor veto the Macon County dog track bill, thus allowing it to become law. Yesterday, however, Governor James sent a memo to Senator Mike Weeks and Representative Thomas Reed, telling them he would veto the bill because pending amendments to the bill would confuse the voters. This set the wheels in motion for a meeting in the governor's office with Macon County officials, Senator Weeks, and Representative Reed. After that meeting, the governor decided not to veto the bill. James said he changed his mind because the pending amendments were withdrawn.
And I don't believe once a bill becomes law, it will be amended. And I wanted the people of Macon County to know precisely what they're voting on. And they forthwithly withdrew all ads of that nature and such ads in the future.
The governor partially based his opposition to the bill on an attorney general's opinion, which said it was unconstitutional. Just 10 days earlier, Attorney General Charles Graddick issued this opinion, which states, quote, "The courts are the proper forum for determining such questions." Senator Weeks says he's glad the affair is over. Representative Reed says the people of Macon County should have a right to vote on the issue. Elsewhere in the Capitol, bills aimed at easing the Medicaid crunch were debated. The House passed a bill funding this year's pay raises for teachers and state employees. Added to that bill was a provision to allow Governor James to use any unencumbered balances in State Department budgets to resolve the state's Medicaid problem. The House also passed a 13-bill package designed to clean up the Medicaid regulations and provide long-term relief to the problem. The Senate also tackled the Medicaid problem by continuing its debate on a bill to raise corporate income taxes. The debate ran long as Senator Ed Robertson of Northport talked against the bill. Robertson says the state needs to clean up the welfare mess, so no new taxes will be needed. The bill, as amended, would generate about $50 million for Medicaid and similar medical care services. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The four, Paul Pettit, Carl Adamson, Wade Hilton, and Bill Franklin, were given a certificate for their work during the November tornado. They were on duty at the National Weather Service on Sunday, November 25th, when the tornado hit the Montgomery area. There were no casualties in the storm, but 7 homes were destroyed and some 45 others were damaged in the Green Acres and Heatherton Heights areas. There was also some damage at the Fieldcrest apartment complex in Gunner Industrial Park. In thanking them for their efforts during the storm, Mayor Farmer said the four gave Montgomery residents a 20-minute warning before the tornado hit and was instrumental in saving the lives of area residents. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
In saving the lives.
Young carefully wove the civil rights issue in the current political presidential campaign into his speech. He urged blacks to show up at the polls March 11th in Alabama in an attempt to keep the black voice in America strong. At the same time, Young endorsed President Carter for re-election. Young did call Mr. Carter's opponent, Edward Kennedy, a good senator and said he shall remain a good senator.
If President Carter could only carry Georgia, and if he couldn't carry Alabama and Florida, then he really wouldn't be a viable presidential candidate. And I would say that if in New England, Senator Kennedy can only carry Massachusetts and can't carry New Hampshire and Vermont, he is not a viable presidential candidate.
Young said the Carter administration has seen many advances for minorities, but more needs to be done to put blacks into the financial world as employers and not employees. Young asked to beg off a question about the error in votes on a proposed Jewish settlement along the West Bank by saying he didn't want to make a value judgment of Donald McHenry, his UN successor. Young did say that the hectic negotiations that go on could easily result in a communications mix-up. On the economy, Young laid the blame of inflation on the spiraling price of oil and said the best way to fight inflation is to develop good trade relations with the OPEC nations, which he says includes the oil-producing African nations like Robert Mugabe's new independent Zimbabwe. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
The clientele here pretty well summed up the Congress and public view when the act was passed 2 years ago, that it's good in principle. Deregulation certainly is in keeping with our U.S. free enterprise system. But when it comes to affecting your airport and resulting in loss of essential service to the community, or creating financing problems for the airport, then it's got to be looked at in a different light.
Dr. Joe Harrison, a history professor at Auburn for 21 years, is one of the 100 faculty members who signed the letter. Faculty members in 5 departments signed their names, but no deans, department heads, nor persons working on projects involving the state were asked to sign. Harrison says the faculty members who signed the letter aren't part of an organized committee, but an informal group whose concern isn't related to the qualifications of any candidate, but rather to the political nature of the governor's power and the potential for serious damage to the future of Auburn and higher education throughout Alabama. The statement apparently resulted from reports that the governor has delayed calling an Auburn Board of Trustees meeting to name a new president because the candidate he supports, believed to be State Highway Director Rex Rayner, doesn't have enough votes to win the trustee election. The governor's press secretary, John Ham, says the faculty statement is based on several incorrect assumptions. Ham says the governor hasn't called a trustee meeting because he's been tied up with the legislature and the Medicaid funding crisis. Dr. Harrison emphasizes that this faculty letter is not a personal attack against Governor James or Dr. Rayner, but rather a statement of concern over the delay in selecting a new president for Auburn University. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News, Auburn.
This is the second year the Alabama Association of Colleges and Universities has honored persons it feels have contributed greatly to the advancement of higher education in Alabama. This year's honorees include Frank Samford. Samford serves on the Auburn University Board of Trustees and the Cumberland Law School Advisory Board. H. Brandt Ayers. Ayers is a member of the Talladega College Board of Trustees. John Evans, a member of the Birmingham Southern College Board of Trustees. Evans also serves on the Board of Directors of the Alabama Association of Independent Colleges. Mrs. A.G. Gaston and her husband. Members of over 26 boards, they've also been active in the United Negro College Fund. Representatives of various state education agencies and past award winners also heard Lieutenant Governor George McMillan praise the association's efforts bringing together the state's public and private institutions. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Using the state capitol as a backdrop for a news conference, Mayor Johnny Ford claimed that some 2,500 clients will be turned out of 100 mental facilities in the state if the centers are not properly funded through the Department of Pensions and Security. Ford says daycare and training services for the mentally retarded as well as diagnostic and evaluation services will have to be curtailed. Erwin Wood, president of the local mental health board in Troy, backed the mayor of Tuskegee in his call for immediate action for a change in budgeting procedures by Pensions and Security. Wood says a decision must be made before May 1st. Fox Johnston, who is executive director for mental health in Pike, Macon, and Bullock counties, says money will come to Alabama from Washington if the state will provide a funding mechanism under a matching formula.
We plead with Commissioner Cooper and with the governor to keep us in the state bill so that there's a means of getting the funds to us after we receive relief from Congress.
To draw attention to the funding of mental health programs, Mayor Ford has urged the public to attend a hearing tomorrow afternoon at the State Highway Department Auditorium in the Capitol Complex in Montgomery. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
A Delta airline official says there's nothing anyone can do to stop Eastern from discontinuing service to Montgomery. Delta's public affairs manager, Wayne Schweitzer, says there's only one option available: to create a more profitable airline market by keeping the planes full and cutting down on no-shows. Montgomery's no-show rate is 16%, 7% higher than the national average. To combat that problem, the city, airport authority, and Chamber of Commerce may soon begin an advertising campaign to alert residents how much no-shows cost the airlines and ultimately you, the consumer. Airport Authority Director Ken Muse says the authority gave its go-ahead on the plan last night. Meanwhile, Delta officials are planning to replace one DC-9 jet flight with a larger 727, which has 49 more seats. Currently, Delta's Montgomery fleet includes 3 DC-9s and 4 727s. Airport Authority Director Muse told us he hopes to have some good news when the authority meets next month but he wouldn't say what that news would be. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
Hornet fans packed the C.J. Dunn Arena to capacity this evening. However, Alabama-Huntsville was not intimidated. The Chargers scored the first 8 points in the game. However, the Hornets came back strong with number 33, Melvin Creighton, leading the way. He had 14 first-half points. Alabama State played good defense, forcing 13 overs with some leading to the easy basket. The Hornets led by 6 at the half, 40-34. ASU did not give Alabama-Huntsville a chance in the second period. Kevin Loader saw to that personally. He had 22 points on the night. The Chargers did manage to cut the margin to 5 with 4 minutes left in the game, but the Hornets scored the next 12 straight points. All that remained was the countdown to victory. The final margin stood 83-72. It's the first District 27 championship in Alabama State's history. The Hornets will begin a quest for a national championship on Monday in Kansas City. Fred Albers, WSFA TV Sports.
Something interesting is going on in Montgomery you should consider. It may put a different slant on buying that new home. 11 rundown houses in the Cottage Hill area are going to have facelifts, and then they're going to be sold. In conjunction with the Landmarks Foundation and Cottage Hill Association, a savings and loan company will finance the renovation.
A subsidiary of First Southern Federal Savings and Loan here in Montgomery has purchased these 11 houses, and they will be restoring the outsides of the buildings, landscaping, re-roofing, restoring carpentry work, and making some architectural changes. And at that point, they will be offering them back for sale, putting them back on the market to people who will be buying for a residence here in the neighborhood.
The residents who've already purchased houses to restore in this area seem to think they made a good deal. Architect Tom Blunt, who lives down the street, says these offer some real advantages to house buyers.
My house has 12-foot ceilings, and per square foot, it's about equal to heating and cooling a new house. But what I'm doing is heating and cooling 50% more volume than you do in a new house. But I feel like if ever I had to turn off my air conditioner and turn off my heater, the house could handle it. I've got efficient coal burner type fireplaces, and to keep me warm, and high ceilings and double hung windows for summer heat.
What about paying for a house? Can't you usually get a better deal here in this area?
Houses are cheaper per square foot than new housing. Some cities it's been difficult to finance older housing, but we haven't had that problem in Montgomery. In the fact that First Southern is undertaking this project, and that they being the people that finance the houses, makes it pretty easy to get into here.
Blunt also mentioned woodworking, moldings, and quality overall workmanship found in the old houses as a lure to home buyers. And looking for a new house, it's a good idea to think old as well as new, whatever the section of town. So before you buy that house, look at the advantages of buying an older house that could be restored. This is Coping, and I'm Ivy Berman.
I had some teeth when I went to Legion Field up there December 1st, and I bought me a big old tiger in Auburn. I paid $16 for that thing, and I went on to Birmingham, and I had that tiger by the tail, and I got going around Legion Field, you know, and getting that speared up. And after I looked around, and the school board read Auburn 18 and Alabama 17, and that's when I swallowed my teeth, and I ain't got no teeth.
That University of Alabama defeat may have caused Shorty Price to lose his bite, but his bark is still going strong. Shorty has 2 claims to fame in Alabama. He's the Crimson Tide's loudest cheerleader, and he boasts of having lost races for just about every political post in Alabama. Shorty's experience in politics, or at least in campaigning, was the basis for his first book. Now he's written an autobiography.
And it starts the day I was born in 21, comes all the way through November 78 when Bob James beat me for governor. And I told Governor James when he came to the Civic Center in Montgomery here right before the general election in 78, I said, Governor, he came over and spoke to me, smiled, you know, as like he always does, nice and friendly, the gentleman that he is. and I think he's doing a good job as governor. He knocked off 700 of them Wallace leeches off the state payroll the first month he was in office, and that tickled my goozle.
There's something else that tickles Shorty's goozle. That's watching Bear Bryant's team defeat its opponents. In fact, Bear's winning tradition and Shorty's own love of competition make the two kindred spirits.
I thought about this. Bear had wrestled with a bear when he was a boy up in Arkansas, and he got the nickname Bear. And he said, I ain't nothing but a winner. Well, I began to think about it. You know, I was going to name my book Hell on Earth, because I've been through hell backwards 400,000 times and been in practically every jail in Alabama. Oh, this politics is a rough game. And I just began to think I got a little flack about the title, you know, Hell on Earth by Shorty Price. And I decided I'd just name it Shorty, because they know me everywhere as Shorty, you know, football and politics and everything. Just name it Shorty. And then I began to think, well, I am nothing but a loser.
Why do you say that?
I've run 13 times for public office, and I didn't get beat for 13 times. Ain't that a loser? That's 100%, ain't it?
Do you feel like the loser?
No, I'm no loser. I'm a winner. I haven't had to miss meal collect in a long time. I eat 3 squares a day, and I get my rest at night, and I got a fine family, and I'm not no loser. I'm a winner.
Are you out of politics?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't give 10 cents to see an ant eat a bale of hay if it had anything to do with politics.
Why?
It's a rotten, stinking, low-down, nasty game, and it takes big fellas to play that game.
But you ran for office.
But Lisa, that was my dream back when I was picking cotton for 35 cents a hundred in the good old Hoover days. I dreamed of being governor of Alabama. But my high school teacher, when I finished high school in 1940 at Louisville High School in Louisville, I was 85 miles down the road here, 30 miles east of Troy. You ever been to Louisville? Little wide spot in the road, you know. And I was 7 miles down Highway 51, where George Wallace from. But my teacher didn't tell me that if I really was serious about being governor of Alabama, I better have $1 million in the bank just before I ever qualified. And when I ran for governor in '58, I had $11.35 to make a race for governor on. You know, there was 14 running, and you know what? I ran last. I told them I was supposed to run last. I had the shortest legs of any man in the race and the least amount of money. But I fought as hard as I could fight, and I came in last.
Shorty says he's thinking of retiring as Alabama's head cheerleader, but who could give this up?
Roll Tide, roll! Go, Bama #1, go!
Lisa Nielsen reporting for Alabama Illustrated.
And in compliance with...
It wasn't the news some of Alabama's social service representatives and supporters came to hear, but there was some good news at the start of today's public hearing. Pensions and Security Commissioner Gary Cooper did say money matters were better today than they were earlier this week. Cooper said he received verbal word from Washington telling him federal funding cuts would not be as drastic as first thought.
If, in fact, the word that we have gotten from Washington is true, our cutbacks should only have to be approximately $3.5 million.
Those who wanted to speak at today's hearing were limited to 5 minutes. Roy McLaughlin from Selma's United Methodist Children's Home asked why U.S. children had to take second place to foreign aid. Cuts in adult daycare funding would mean a growth in institutional care for the elderly, according to a daycare center official. George Pfeiffer, director of the Alabama Department of Youth Services, urged the Department of P&S to consider proportionate across-the-board cuts in social services. Other speakers asked that funding be prorated, while others urged the audience to go back home, buttonhole their legislators, and also let Governor James know how they feel about budget changes. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
I was comforted because after the pregame meeting that we had, and we shot free throws early in the afternoon. When we left, I could see that the guys were really confident and they had tremendous mental concentration, and that we wanted to play one of the finest ball games that we played all year. And I had very, good confidence that we would win the ball game, and I didn't really think it would be a close ball game. I had that much confidence in the players.
What does it mean to Alabama State? What does it mean to the team to be District 27 champions?
It means a lot. It's history. Alabama State's been here something like 105 years. They've never won a district championship. This was the first for them. It meant a lot to the seniors on this ball club, to win and, you know, be champions of this district of all the small colleges in the state of Alabama. And, you know, it gets us to Kansas City as the district champions, not as a wild card, not as an at-large team, but as a district champion.
Can you win it?
We can win it. We got enough people, we got enough depth, and we got enough experience.
The protesters said they had a manifesto to read to the legislature from the poor people of Alabama. Most were members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference who had come to the Capitol to protest cutbacks in social services. The 6 tried to gain entry to the House chamber, but were held back by the doorkeeper. Capitol security guards were called in to remove them. They were taken out of the rotunda and led downstairs to the security office. Later, they were escorted out of the Capitol to the edge of the grounds and told not to return for the rest of the day. The SCLC and other groups have a protest rally planned for later this month at the state capitol. Meanwhile, the legislature began its debate on a long list of sunset resolutions. By law, the House and Senate must act on the recommendations on the status of state agencies today. In House action, a bill to turn over control of the liquor sales to private business failed. Other potentially controversial sunset recommendations include the Public Service Commission. Both houses are expected to stay late working on the recommendations. The legislature had originally planned a vacation next week, but today they decided to meet 3 days next week. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Gusty Yearout says Senator Stewart's acceptance of the campaign contribution doesn't necessarily mean the money influenced his decision to nominate UW Clement for the federal judgeship. But he says the action looks suspicious, especially since Clement made the contribution in February of 1979 after Stewart had won the Senate race. But Yearout says the issue of the campaign contribution should not be linked to the issue of whether Clement or any other candidate is qualified to be a federal judge.
There are 2 separate issues. One is the campaign contribution of $1,000 at an inappropriate time, which appears to be a conflict of interest, and the separate and distinct issue being whether or not those 2 gentlemen are qualified to be federal judges.
Yearout says Stewart has cast a pall over the procedure for nominating federal judges, and he says the senator should give the money back. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
The meeting convened at 10 o'clock this morning but adjourned abruptly when we arrived. The meeting was attended by members of the Chamber of Commerce, Prattville Mayor Mac Gray, and Police Chief Norris Champion, who is the subject of much of Lumpkin's investigation. The meeting was reportedly called to look into the allegations made in Lumpkin's series. Immediately on our arrival, all discussion stopped, and a quick effort to establish a meeting with Channel 12's news director Skip Haley was set up. While the telephone call setting the meeting was being made, Chamber official Worth Roberts explained that they didn't fully understand the allegations, and before any more such meetings were held, they wanted to talk to Haley. But one of the men, Ralph Henderson, told me this was a meeting that didn't need to be covered.
Even though the committee indicated to me that it had done little work, Roberts indicated that a survey of 150 businessmen in Prattville had been taken, showing that the businessmen were satisfied with the Prattville Police Department. But Roberts indicated to me after the meeting that he and the committee agreed that there might be some problems with the police department, but he wouldn't elaborate. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
The president's son, Chip, says his father will win big in Alabama, but campaign workers must get people out to vote. The younger Carter points out leadership, foreign policy, inflation, and the energy crisis are the big issues in the 1980 election. Chip Carter says the president has a proven record with all Americans and people of all nations. The 29-year-old Carter says it's not ironic that his father is doing most of his campaigning from the White House when 4 years ago, candidate Carter criticized President Ford for the same thing.
I think that is in a no-win situation politically. The Iranian hostage situation changes every day, which you can tell from your own media. Dad feels like he needs to be there. If he were to leave, I think that people would say that he's given up on the Iranian hostages. If he doesn't leave, then people say he's given up on politics. So I think he's chosen to do what he thinks is right.
Chip Carter wouldn't predict how large a margin his father will receive in Alabama, but said the figure will be larger than those of Senator Kennedy's in his home area. Tuesday night will tell if he's right. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
Prices at the wholesale level were up another 1.5% in February. That puts the inflation rate at around 20% on an annual basis, and it compares with last year's wholesale boost of 12.5%. Near-record increases in gasoline and heating oil prices played a major role in boosting the February index to 235.4. And what that means is wholesale goods that cost $100 in 1967 cost $235.40 in February. The government has been unable to check inflation. The prime interest rate hit a new record high today when Harris Trust and Savings Bank of Chicago raised it to 18%. The move affecting corporate loans came as several of the nation's biggest banks were raising their prime rate to 17.75%. The jobless rate stood at 6% last month, and the Labor Department says that's down from 6.2% in January. The actual number of people unemployed came to 6.3 million. That's roughly 100,000 less than in January. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
She says convention tourism in Montgomery is looking better this year, after last year when people panicked over price increases.
Things look real good for Montgomery. They look even better than they did 2 years ago, which was a little better than last year. So we're looking for a real good year. We've had a lot of conventions that have booked in.
Mann says tourism is the #1 industry in the state, with benefits from it including more jobs and more money coming in, especially with the Blue-Gray game sponsored each year by the Lions Club as a fundraising project. Mann says the game has unlimited potential for tourists and says her office will continue to work with the game and sell it as a city attraction. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
I'm very pleased that WSFA, its general manager, Dixon Lorben, and the staff have seen fit to broadcast or telecast our tournament. We think that it's particularly important to the university for the Hornets to go to Kansas City, to go national, because it not only gives the university some national image, some national publicity, but also because they, after all, are representatives of the people's university, or everybody's university. They represent the state and Montgomery and give us a different sort of publicity from what has been traditional for our institution, for our city, and for our state. It helps in the matter of recruitment of athletes, recruitment of students, and believe it or not, good faculty members somehow like to be around an institution that has a good team, because a good team means recognition.
So athletic teams have further ramifications than just the athletic program?
Why, certainly so.
Mm-hmm. What do you hope happens out of this, out of all the publicity now?
Well, first of all, we expect to get a national championship. And we expect to bring to Montgomery and to Alabama the first such championship from NAIA. That's what we hope. Secondly, we hope to let folk know that there is a school named Alabama State University in the capital city.
This is the story of Henry. Henry's an African-crested porcupine. For the last couple of years, Henry's lived a happy and peaceful life at the Montgomery Zoo. But alas, Henry's a bachelor. And at 4 years young and a strong and handsome 40 pounds, he wants someone to notice him. Today, Henry's wish came true. He met a girl, or rather, two of them. After a first-class plane ride from Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, the two young female porcupines were formally introduced to Henry. Once the threesome get to know each other, zoo officials are optimistic that Henry will become a proud father this fall. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.